Happy International Batman Day, everybody. It's Dwight here again with you on The Broken Brain. Today, just a quick episode to talk a little bit about Batman. You may or may not, probably may not, know that the very first Batman Day was apparently celebrated on July 23rd, 2014, which was the 75th anniversary of Batman existing. If you didn't know that, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Those of you who listen to the show know that I'm a big superhero fan. All you have to do is go back and listen to many of the episodes to be able to confirm that. You can also go back and listen to many of the Batman episodes. There's several anyway. Long time ago, we talked about how Batman needs some trauma therapy. Then recently again talked about how in Matt Reeves' The Batman, the most recent film adaptation, live action, in the episode titled The Batman Has the PTSD, Sharon Blady and I talk quite a bit about that. As we also talk about the Batman comic run, The Three Jokers, a 3 or 4 issue comic run that was a very interesting thought experiment, and would be really interesting to see that depicted other ways too. But it's great as a book. I would recommend it. So, if you're a Batman fan, you'll probably like this. If you're not, I don't know. You might want to skip on. But it's up to you how you want to expose yourself to the world and the popular culture around you. What I did to prepare for this episode is I put out the call to all the fandoms and geekdoms and nerddom places where I could think of. I posted in a couple of podcasting forums, as well as the Great Geek Refuge group, which is a wonderful Facebook group that is anti-gatekeeping and anti-toxicity in their fandom, and also have a great series of podcasts. If you look up Great Geek Refuge, especially At the Diner and some other shows that they have. Also, over at Paprika, which I mentioned before on the program, Daryl Mansell's wonderful group, also very anti-toxicity that you're going to find on the web for fandoms and such. Also, make sure you're looking up under your podcasts, Paprika Reviews, where you can hear movie reviews and interesting shows about movies and fandom as well. I would definitely recommend that. In fact, speaking of Batman, they did an analysis of The Long Halloween on Paprika, and they literally went over the whole year and talked about the book, The Long Halloween, the comic and volume that's been put together. And just like the original release of the comics, they took it a whole year, and each holiday talked about the chapter, or the issue, rather, in that series about that holiday as Batman's investigating a serial killer over the course of one Halloween to another. Many elements of which have been pulled into a lot of Batman projects. So I put out the call to these wonderful people out there, and y'all, hopefully some of you are listeners, so sure you're out there, and hopefully you're here to hear your comments. So the question in the post was, what does Batman mean to you? And then second of all, what, if any, Batman stories that have not been adapted for the live-action screen and movies would you want to see happen? So, got some interesting things. I'm just going to go through and share with you the answers to those questions. Maybe with a little commentary. First off, Patrick O'Connor, he shared these answers. I'm a big Batman fan, not 100% sure what he means to me. I would love to see a film set early in Batman's career that opens with a Mafia commission-style meeting consisting of Falcone, Maroni, Thorne, Cobblepot, Zico, and Zionis discussing frustrations related to Batman. Have Strange, Quinn, and Crane are currently employed at Arkham. Dent is still DA. Not really sure where that would go, but I'd like it to be in the early days before the more freaky villains come about. So, interesting thought there. A lot, I will say, my experience is a lot of the Batman movies have been set in the early part of his career, and this would definitely be an interesting take on early in his career that would be reminiscent, I think, of Year One. Year One's another Batman classic that has been, let's be honest, used as the roots for a lot of different things. This making it more focused on the Mafia. Batman versus the Mafia is a very interesting thing that's a subject of a lot of the comics that you haven't seen as much in the movies. Veronica Edutrix Jones said Bats is the most film noir hero, so he is my favorite. My favorite Bat story is Killing Joke. Very dark story with the Joker. It has been made into an animated movie. Many Batman fans feel like it's a crummy animated movie, that they added all sorts of weird things that they didn't need to, that were not part of it. For those of you familiar with how in some of the comics, after a certain point, Batwoman plays the role of Oracle, at least for a while she is either permanently or in recovery from, depending on which line you're reading, a paralysis, a partial paralysis or semi-paralysis from damage to the spine. That came from the Joker choosing to shoot her in the spine in a way that wouldn't kill her, but would leave her paralyzed, as a way to torture her father, Commissioner Gordon, as well. So that comes from the Killing Joke, and that sets up a whole bunch of things. Daryl Mansell, the Seed himself, the king and organizer of the Paprika Network, shared these thoughts. Batman has meant a lot to me over the years. I find a story of one man fighting a hopeless cause a somewhat romantic notion. Like Veronica said, it works best when it's viewed as a noir story, and the layers the writers and artists have weaves into the chapter is a testament to imagination and wonder. Part 2, still waiting for a proper Court of Owls adaptation. And I'll tell you, me too. The Court of Owls is wonderful, wonderful villains. It's like the Illuminati of Gotham City, if you're not familiar. I actually have a Court of Owls mask hanging on my wall. If any of you watch the videos of the podcasts over on the Patreon, you've seen it hanging up over my shoulder, over on the wall there. So, very, very interesting take on it when you say fighting a hopeless cause, which is very interesting because there's no way Batman's really going to be able to solve all the problems in Gotham. One of the things that comes up a lot is people criticize the fact that he goes out and uses his fists and is detectiving for vigilante justice, and instead of using his millions and billions to help. Well, if you are a true Batman fan, you know that from the comics, that is addressed. He does use his millions and billions for charitable work and for helping the police and for different things in Gotham. One of the problems with that, which is addressed in the newest movie, The Batman, is massive corruption to where those in power in Gotham simply can't be trusted. It's just another prong in a multi-pronged attack that he uses. So, Antonio Palacios, who's the host and creator of the Cult-Worthy podcast, shared this in a podcasting group. When I was a kid, Batman was my favorite. Now I'm a little weird on him being an ultra-billionaire, but only caring about Gotham. Meanwhile, Tony Stark fights for the whole world. I would love to see the Clayface epic from the Batman, the animated series, Feet of Clay, be made into a film. I will say that there's so much in Batman the Animated Series to be mined and used that absolutely, you see a couple of those pop up, just like the Court of Owls pops up in a couple of these as well. Interesting, going back to that challenge that I didn't realize this comment was right here. I would have made that comment there about his billionaire status, and it is interesting that he's very, very focused on Gotham. So it's an interesting point. I like it. John R. Brooks. Batman is maybe my favorite comic character. I've loved his stories since I was a kid. I would love to see the Black Glove in Batman Inc. in live action. You know, that's one I'm not as familiar with, but Batman Inc., I have read some of those comics as well, where Batman essentially franchises out into the world. And I think it's Knight and Squire are the Batman and Robin of England in that. It's touched on in the latest run, or one of the recent runs called Batman the Detective, which takes place soon after actually the death of Alfred and Batman questioning who he is, and some very, very interesting villainy from a very, very interesting villain named Equilibrium. But one of the things that touches on is Batman's attachment to and involvement in international areas, how he has gone around the world and set up heroes to fight for them. So I guess that actually kind of goes back to Antonio's point as well a little bit, is that you do have some storylines where he branches out beyond Gotham, but very interesting to see how he's got medical care set up in the UK if it's needed for him or for someone else, and secret mobile Batcave type headquarters, as well as these other people he's helped to install into the hero roles in other countries. Very interesting. Tom Vernich. I've loved Batman since I was a kid. I loved Keaton, but like others, the animated series hooked me. Everything about it. The orchestrals, the Gotham coldness, the overall tone. Yeah, I like the whole dark and broody thing, but I think my favorite part of Batman was that he's just a man among gods. Gods that are scared of him. They know he knows. That's a very interesting thing in the DC universe. Batman pulling his own as a full member of the Justice League, and even in some cases, standing up to Superman. That's a common thing, somewhat common, that happens in the comics. And Batman's very good at strategically planning to take out or take on very, very powerful characters, which is always interesting to me to see how they write that. A colleague of mine, Mike Fitch, who has been on the program quite a bit, not for a while now, but he's a professional counselor that I've worked with and around for a long, long time. I've enjoyed Batman movies and the animated series, but I've never been a huge Batman guy. I'm more into the X-Men. That being said, I'm okay with the stories that they have put on the screen. I only wish Arnold could be in every Batman movie, lol. Thinking about it, I actually enjoy the original TV show from the 60s the most with Adam West. The zaniness and absurdness of the characters was great. Although I enjoy the newer movies, they're quite dark. On the latest movie, I didn't really enjoy how they made Batman not completely invulnerable and saw him take some hits. I'm not sure if Mike is saying I didn't enjoy how they made him not completely invulnerable. I think he liked how he took some hits, is what he's saying. Sorry, missing word there somewhere. Sorry, no less comments all over the place, but these comments usually do this to me. Okay. Yep, a little all over the place, Mike. I wasn't sure what you were saying. I will say that one of Batman's superpowers is that he is fairly invulnerable. No one ever talks about that. It's like a superpower that's not mentioned, a kind of narrative superpower, plot armor. Obviously, that is there. Lee Messersmith, social worker, again, just like Mike, been on the program and colleague of mine who practices just down the road from me. I love The Dark Knight. That's the series that really pulled me in. The emotion, and it's Christian Bale. There you go. Christian Bale, probably my favorite Batman, although Pattinson did a great job recently. And to be honest, anybody who's picked up that role, I've found some good things about their performance, I think. Even Clooney, he did his best. He was working with some weird material, let's be honest. The Dark Knight competes very closely. In fact, depending on which one I just watched, the Batman and the Dark Knight bounce back and forth between favorite and second favorite Batman movies for me. So, Bat Dan, Facebook commenter, I actually really got into Batman as an adult. I loved the Adam West show as a kid, but it was the animated series that really did it for me. I would love a live-action adaptation of the two-part Mr. Freeze storyline from the animated series. That and the episode The Time I Almost Got Him would also be great. Not sure 100% if that's the episode title, but it's the one where the villains are all playing cards, talking about the time they almost got Batman. That's a great episode. I remember that from the animated series. Well, wonderful to see that. Andres Hernandez of the Listen to the Words podcast, creator and host. Batman has always had a special place for me. The guy has no superpower, yet he is feared and respected. Shows you that as a human, we can all achieve greatness and have others respect us. I would love to see the Nightfall storyline. I know they kind of did that already, but if they did and brought in Azrael, I think it would make for a killer movie or series of movies. For those who don't know, Azrael is a DC hero who's a little more on the violent, malicious side, and he took over for Batman during a time where Batman had a busted up back from Bane, which you might remember from The Dark Knight Rises. They used that part of the storyline. But in this storyline, Azrael takes over for Batman upon his request and is a much more violent and dark Batman. There is a turning point where he actually allows a serial killer who's caught in a trap of his own, hoist by his own petard, so to speak. He allows him to die rather than get him out of the trap that he's gotten himself into, which is very not Batman-like. There's a wonderful line of dialogue in that comic where after Commissioner Gordon meets with him on the rooftop and chastises him for the fact that the serial killer died, and Azrael, as Batman, honestly doesn't care at all, and then leaves. Commissioner Gordon says to himself, I just want to know what's happened to my friend. Where is he gone? Obviously knows it's someone else. So replacing Batman's very interesting. Dick Grayson played the role of Batman for a while, also while Batman was going around doing the Batman Inc. thing and setting up other Batman types. Mariah Beachboard. Batman seems so accessible to me growing up, and more so than other heroes. I think that's because of Adam West and all the movies. I love them, but I'm definitely moving on to better stories now that I feel safe enough to explore the comics and superheroes as an adult. My taste in dark stories hasn't changed, though. I think that's what kept me coming back to the movies. They were dark. Very dark. And the comics, many of them have taken, especially since The Killing Joke and Death in the Family, very dark thing as well. I mean, I guess you could go back to just The Dark Knight Returns and Alan Moore, and just a lot of things that have directed it that way. Look at what's happened to the Joker, leaning more into the serial killer rather than the clown prince of crime. So some people don't like that. Some people do. It would be interesting to see some of the sillier things that people are calling for here come back. That would be interesting someday. Jason Hemming, otherwise known as The Vern from Cinema Recall Podcast, big friend of the show. What does Batman mean to me? You know what? I don't have an answer for the Caped Crusader, but I learned about my kink fetish after watching Catwoman and Batman Returns. Okay. As for a Batman story that hasn't been adapted to screen, I'm not sure. DC Animation usually has adapted almost every story. A live-action Killing Joke would be cool, but please do the story the way it was in the comic, not the animated movie. Don't add things just to make it longer. One of the things that bothered a lot of people is there was, in the animated movie adaptation of this, which I haven't seen, I've just read about this, there was either an implication or a direct statement that Batman and Batgirl at some point had a romantic or sexual connection, which is never, as far as I know, never appeared in the comics. It's much more of a parental overseeing, you're my buddy's daughter kind of a thing, and that definitely is not in The Killing Joke. So there's things that they added there that have really bothered people. Rob Maynard of the Reels of Justice, and this is Rob, Ben Haslam, and Ryan Luis Rodriguez, rather, that are coming up, are all friends of the show from the Reels of Justice podcast, and they're going to finish us out here. Rob tells us, the Batman stuff I generally like is the humorous stuff. 60s series, Brave and the Bold, Lego Batman. Batman is so dark and serious of a character that is ripe for comedy. I don't think I want a live adaptation or remake of those, though. Let the kids have their emo the Batman. I'll stick to Batman and Robin in the animated series. So once again, embracing that. You know, it reminds me of something, actually going back to Daryl Mansell, and I think Rob may be on this train too, saying that now that we've got a lot of these Batman movies that are in keeping with Batman, it would be interesting to bring back some of the camp. But also, you know, one of the outlets for that is Superman. We've got a dark history of Batman movies. It would be interesting to see the bright, hopeful, optimistic Superman that we see in the comics, which is where Superman really has some room to be more interesting. But animated series, definitely. Not as big a fan of Batman and Robin. The 60s series I do remember watching as a kid, and it would be interesting to bring back some of the campiness. Let's get Batman and Superman and Robin playing tennis together like they are in some of the comics. Google that tennis cover page, tennis, Superman, Batman, and Robin. There's also plenty of others of them playing some sports together, which it seems like Superman would have an advantage. Ben Haslam, I've always liked Batman for how human he is. This is a man with a broken past that doesn't want anyone else to have to experience. But he's careful and methodical in the way he goes about it. Give him some time to prepare and he can find a way to overcome pretty much any superpowered threat out there, even though he doesn't possess any powers himself. It's those two elements that I think exemplify when Batman is at his best. It makes his stories more interesting and relatable than anything involving a godlike Superman could ever get to for me. I don't know that I have any original ideas of where I want live-action Batman to go, though I am very excited for whatever Matt Reeves has in store for us, as his first effort was fantastic. But I do think the closer we skew towards reality, the better the stories will be. I've read some suggestions that the story could center around the Court of Owls, which I wasn't familiar with at first, but the more I read, the more potential I thought it had. Something that drifts more towards fighting back against the horrors of human nature, as opposed to something like Mr. Freeze, are the Batman stories I think would be very interesting, especially in our current dark political climate. And I will say, I thought one of the strengths of Matt Reeves' adaptation recently was that he did seem to touch on some of the issues and even push against some of the darkness. If you look at the end of that movie, no spoilies, I won't. But as far as Batman's focus and actually doubting his own self and what he's doing. Ryan Luis Rodriguez says, I would love to see The Court of Owls just because it leans into the whole paranoid thriller element of Gotham. But most importantly, I want to see a faithful adaptation of No Man's Land. It's probably not feasible in live action just in terms of scope, but it's my favorite crossover in comics canon. I love Batman because he can be broken, but he has an unwavering sense of basic morality. He also pushes away anyone he cares about, and I can relate to that in a palpable sense. Batman is definitely flawed in that area. In, I believe it's Hush, the real classic story, they really delve into the romance between him and Catwoman, which periodically they do. There's even a line of comics, Batman and Catwoman, that came out recently where you're looking at later in life after they've been married and their daughter has taken up the mantle of Batman. But very interesting here where he looks, I'm not familiar with No Man's Land, so that's one I'm going to have to check out. Well, a happy Batman Day, everyone. I hope this has been a little bit of fun to go down the Gotham Road to the Bat Cave, so to speak, and analyze some things about Batman. Once again, if you haven't listened to our Three Jokers episode or The Batman Has the PTSD, they're a lot of fun, and I think delve into some interesting areas of Batman. So I hope you'll get out there and read or watch something Batman related today or this week. Love y'all. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.